Earlier this week, Beach Buddies organised a Southern 100 course clean-up with a team of volunteers led by charity founder Bill Dale. I went down to the Southern 100 headquarters to find out more. Why do we need charities like Beach Buddies? And perhaps answering that question, why do so many of us choose to leave litter around our beautiful island? Later on the programme, we've got some top tips from one of the volunteers on the best places to watch the races, as well as a Southern 100 history lesson. But first, what is Bill Dale's role in Beach Buddies?
That's a very good question. I suppose you could say I'm the managing director. We are a limited company now. We've turned ourselves into an incorporated charity. So yeah, I'm managing director. Big title, isn't it?
It is. But also founder.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was in 2006. Walking the beach with my dogs, and they picked up rubbish and we joined in, and here I am. Well, is it now? It's 17 years later. Amazing, really. It's been a fantastic story, really. What a journey as well. Met many thousands of people. We've signed up 19,000 different volunteers in the Isle of Man since it started. Lots of those are school children, and you know what? That's the best bit, because when you go to talk in a school and you see the faces on the children when you show them the pictures of how animals are dying and how it's our fault because of the rubbish, then that means something to them. And I think the Isle of Man has seen a big difference in the last 5-10 years, where even the side of the roads is better than it was, and the beaches are immaculate. National Geographic actually said that they felt we had the cleanest beaches in Europe, if not the world.
And of course, you mentioned there about animals dying. Tell us a little bit more about that, because I think people might think, oh, well, an old plastic bottle or a can or something, that's hardly going to kill an animal.
You see, that's the theory that some people come up with. What's my plastic bottle? What difference is that going to make? But plastic bottles break down. The tide comes in 2-3 times a day, and twice a day, obviously, and it gets dry and wet. So plastic biodegrades like everything does. It takes a long time in some cases. Some plastics break down very quickly into little pieces. And when you analyse the contents of a dead bird's stomach particularly, they are absolutely full of small pieces of plastic and polystyrene, that sort of stuff. I've given a presentation at a school today, and the final picture I show is of 2 sperm whales who washed up on a beach in Denmark. And they looked perfectly healthy. They weren't old or anything. They just died. They examined the contents of the stomach, and on average inside each stomach was 8,000 pieces of plastic. And that's our fault. As human beings have done that. It's they haven't gone round and picked the plastic up particularly. It's floating and under the water, and it's floating in the water. And that stuff is our fault. So the whole aim, when I first started this, it was all about picking up rubbish and tidying the place up, which is still one of the priorities. But when you think about it, the real aim has to be to stop this happening. Because when I was a kid, and when you were a kid, throwing rubbish in the street was the sort of thing you got to clip around the ear for, I'm not suggesting there should be violence towards people who does that, but at the moment, the rest of the world seems to be oblivious to the fact that throwing your rubbish away anywhere, you could be 100 miles from the beach, it goes down the drain in a river out to sea. That's where 90% of it's coming from. The other 10% is from the fishing industry, shipping, and odd people going to the beach and leaving stuff. But that's so, that's only a small amount. 90% of it is coming down rivers, and it can start anywhere. So if you start thinking that it's okay if I just throw this one piece of rubbish in the street, that's really not the answer, because you are contributing towards the death of many, many animals. And more to the point, pollution of the oceans. They reckon now every fish has got some plastic inside it. It's crazy.
And of course, I suppose the quite remarkable thing about all this is, and I remember this as probably a young boy. We used to regularly go along the beach at Pool Vash and pick up wood for the fire.
Yes.
And it was wood. And then I remember vaguely there was these little red caps that would appear, little red plastic caps. And that must have been sort of the early 70s.
Yeah.
That was the first time that I'd ever seen plastic getting washed up on the shore. And now, everywhere you go, apart from the beaches in the Isle of Man, of course, because of the wonderful work you do, everywhere you go, there's plastic.
Yeah, and if you analyse, as you say in there, where does it come from? I think it was a culture change. Something happened in the 70s where there was a bit of a culture where everybody thought, the world's free place. Remember, there was a lot of stuff going on in America about, freedom and we can do what we like. But they forgot to add the element of responsibility to that. Now, I am a great believer in some of the theories of the 70s where, you free yourself from politics and try to think about the world as a whole and, the environment. And it's always stuck with me. But this idea that you can go along and just carry on polluting the atmosphere and the streets and the roads and the rivers and, of course, the beaches with plastic and junk just by throwing it without thinking about it it's unacceptable. And one of the biggest problems I think that we've got is there's no accountability. Even in the Isle of Man, where our volunteers have done a fantastic job and our beaches are setting world standards and people are watching around the world. There's still nobody has ever been prosecuted for, even fly tipping. I actually famously caught somebody who'd been fly tipping and they left their name, the builders had left their name and address, right? So I thought, right, we've got them here. So I took this to, I'm not going to name who it was, but the local commissioners, and I said, I've got the name and address here, what are you going to do about it? Leave it with us. 2 months later, nothing had happened, and I phoned up and said, what's happened? He said, we found out who it was, and we give them a ticking off and they won't do it again. Now, that person, sad as it is, it might have been a one-off, should have been taken to court, prosecuted and fined, and an example made in public. But until that happens, I think a lot of people are just going to think, well, it doesn't matter, we'll get away with it. And that's not acceptable as far as I'm concerned. So in this last few years, I've become a bit frustrated with the fact that there's no accountability. And it doesn't stop what we do. And I have to say there's nothing like the rubbish that we had in the early stages. In the talk I gave this morning, we picked up 30,000 plastic bottles in 6 weekends. Just 2 people. Now it's nothing like that now. Sometimes that was Balaf Beach. You go back to Balaf Beach now. Sometimes people say, I went out today and I only found 2 things. So the world has changed, and I think we've got 19,000, as I say, different volunteers since we started. I reckon you've got at least that many who are out just doing it on their own because they know it's acceptable. And the stigma has disappeared for picking up other people's rubbish, because when I started, loads of people were saying to me, what the hell are you doing? What's the point? You're wasting your time. And I said, well, I'm making some effort. Every bit I pick up is one less. And suddenly people thought, and particularly schools, they just absolutely loved the idea. And when I go into schools now, I've been doing this for a long time, you see on the walls that there's loads of things about the environment, about pollution, about protecting animals, about protecting ourselves from pollution. And particularly the oceans and the wildlife that's being destroyed simply by human beings not thinking it through. So if we've achieved anything, I think the education program has been, without question, the best thing. You get a great feedback, and I've left a bunch of children now from Anacore School on Port Sodrick this afternoon, and honestly, they were running down the beach to pick the rubbish up. So if that carries on, if I get knocked over by a bus tomorrow, if they carry on doing that, then we've achieved something, and whatever happens, we've got a legacy in place where somebody's going to take over from me one day, and this is going to continue. And I think the human race has got to realise programs like ours have got to be started, but you can't just do it once in a while. You've got to keep it going, So we've done something, and I think the Isle of Man makes the Isle of Man a special place. I think islands are different too, because we all have our own identity and we can identify with other islands, and we have water around us all the time, so you see it. But I think the Isle of Man is proving itself to be ultra extra special, and it was lovely when we received the UNESCO Biosphere status that Dr. Han Chun Lee, the head of Biosphere Reserves, came and he actually specifically mentioned what we were doing as a group cleaning beaches, so that'll do me.
So talking to Phil Tubman, and I forget now, what is your official title?
I'm the club president this year. Well, I have been for the last couple of years. Yeah. Yes, I stood when Derek Nicholson passed away. I was promoted to president from chairman, so I followed Derek through in the senior roles in the club.
And of course, this weekend is a really important weekend for the club. The classic racing, probably will be taking place as this programme goes out.
Yep, it's the start of the season again, 2023 for us. The pre-TT Classic has become a firm favourite, as you can see from the number of people who are already here, parked up in the paddock. And of course, gets everything set and ready, and we know what we're doing when it comes to July for the main event, which of course is our Southern 100.
And this year, as I understand it, the ACU are running the event. Is that right?
Well, not the ACU exactly. The ACU are the overall governing body. ACU Events, who now run the TT and the Manx Grand Prix, are providing us with the senior officials to run our event. They're also doing all the important paperwork for the insurances and for the health and safety and all the other stuff that has to go with it to assist us. And they are providing clerk of the course and the safety officer.
And of course, what you do here, this isn't something that you just kind of turn up the weekend before, put a few tables and chairs out, and it's all sorted, is it?
No, we have to start the end of April. Basically, we start, and we're very fortunate. We have a contract with the Southern Young Farmers. They come along and do all the humping and lifting for us now. Most of the committee are similar age to myself, and we're getting too old to be doing all this hard work. So we got the Southern Young Farmers who put all the rector cells out around the course, and then the TT course contractors come along and tie them up and make sure that everything is right for ACU events, because of course they have the ultimate say as to whether the course is fit for purpose or not. But we start at the end of April, and now 2 or 3 days before the event we're just putting the finishing touches to it, hopefully. We've got the support of all the locals again as usual, and I'd just like to say a big thank you to everybody who puts up with us. This particular event has been going on for a long time, but the Southern 100, in fact, has been running since 1955, so everybody knows what's happening.
And there is a huge team involved with this, isn't there?
Yes, there is. We have a committee of 21 people if everybody turns up on the day, and we have a race committee which has additional people, and we're always looking for new members to come along and help us on the workforce, because as I said, the main committee are getting a little bit old now and long in the tooth, and we're desperately looking for younger people to come along and learn the ropes and see how it all goes together and take over from us.
And the range of things that you have to do, I mean, obviously you have to ensure that the event is run safely, but there's catering, there's looking after the paddock, there's fundraising, a whole wealth of things.
We're very fortunate that we have great supporters, one of the main ones being the old market in Douglas. They have raised an enormous amount of money and do so every year for us, but we have other sponsors as well, a lot of sponsors who support our event because it's a family event. It's very much a local event here in Castletown, and we're very fortunate we have a lot of supporters. But yes, the paddock, George has just walked around the paddock for 2 days marking out the pitch for everybody's to put their tent and have their vehicles, because of course again for health and safety they can't be all crammed together now. We have to have a set space for everybody to be in, so that's to do. I've been looking after the catering, but hopefully I've got new people to take it on this year, and it's another slight headache. We've got to make sure that we've got enough stock and everything in, but yeah, it makes a lot of money for the club. And then of course there's the girls who look after the clothes sales and all that sort of stuff. They're busy packing up their stall there today and getting everything ready for Friday. So yeah, there's a lot of effort goes into it.
And if anyone is listening to this and is inspired to join the committee or come and volunteer, how do they go about doing that?
Well, they can ring me or they can ring George Peach. My number is 490-237. and George is 471-301. They can contact us and come along, or just turn up at the clubhouse anytime over this next weekend, make themselves known to us, and we'll find them a job happily.
And of course, by the time this is broadcast, it'll probably be too late for this weekend, but it won't be too late for the Southern 100.
No, indeed not. And we probably struggle more for the Southern 100 because, of course, that is entirely a local event. We rely much more on local people to support us and help us, because a lot of visitors come over for the TT, which makes it easier for us. But, of course, in July, we don't have that many people. So, yeah, desperately looking for assistance and help in the July event. So anybody that's free, please get in touch.
And it's not just the running of the things, it's also marshals as well.
Again, we're very fortunate for marshals. We have our own marshals association, and they do a great job Ewan Crawley is the man to contact there, and he runs he's the chief marshal, and he runs the list for people and finds them positions, and we do the training. Every marshal now should be trained to some degree to know what they're doing. We can't just take people off the hedge anymore and stick them in a white coat and prop them up against the wall. We have to have people who are trained to some degree. It's not very onerous. It's just a case of knowing what you're doing and being part of the event.
And having undertaken the training myself, not trained people, but been trained, it's not a long job, and the skills that you learn are quite useful skills to have in any sort of emergency situation.
Yes, they are. I mean, if you come across any road accident, anything, somebody collapsed in the street, we would give you enough medical knowledge to be able to assist them. Obviously, the first thing to do for an accident is 999, but the skills you would learn as a marshal would be helpful in general life, yeah.
As is often the case, once I stopped recording, Phil started talking about the history of the Southern Hundred, so I switched the tape back on. So we're standing really in the nerve centre of the Southern Hundred. I remember going to school, and this was just a field, and you'll have many memories of the way in which this site has developed over the years.
I do. In fact, this piece we're standing in right now and the piece across the road junction there was all one field back in 1955 when all this started. Actually, the first paddock was at Castletown Football Stadium. They didn't move down here until 1956, 57. And this was one field, and they used to drive stobs into the ground here for the guys to rest their bikes on. And the building, or the headquarters, if you like, today is a nice fancy building, but in 1956 it was in fact a Vulcan bus, and that was where they made the teas and served the teas and coffees from, and the sandwiches. They were always given free to the riders on a Thursday afternoon, because of course they'd be working on the bikes all morning, racing in the afternoon, didn't get their tea before the presentation, so they used to get free tea and sandwiches down here from the side of the Vulcan bus. In fact, the piece where you come in through the gate there, that was a lane, and there was a stone bridge over the Dum River there for the farmer to get the cattle down from Red Gap across the main road and out through onto Ballarlock, which is out on the other side of the bypass road.
And presumably when the competitors were coming over to here to camp, it was camping, it wasn't these fancy big luxury motorhomes.
Well, in fact, most of them didn't camp at all.
Oh, right.
They stayed in local people in Castletown put them up. You could come and stay in my house, and you can come and stay in my house, and that was the way it was. They worked in garages and back kitchens and things, repairing the bikes and getting everything done. Jimmy Linsky's house, I know, was always full of riders. Lots and lots of the townspeople were putting riders up for the duration of the Southern Hundred.
And again, in terms of the development of this site, then you moved from an old bus to something a little bit more fancy, and then eventually to what we've got now.
Yeah, the Vulcan bus was not fit for purpose, or rather, we outgrew the Vulcan bus, so therefore we decided we needed a building. I just happened to be the site electrician for the company that were building the Onken precinct, and they built a nice fancy site office, which was a wooden building, and at the end of the development there, I was able to buy for the club, buy that building off them, and we cut it up into 6 pieces, dismantled it all, put it on a wagon and brought it down to Castletown here, and it lay under a tarpaulin for at least 5 years, waiting to be re-erected. People were doubting that it would ever get put up. Anyway, McCard, the builders, came along and put a base in for us, and we put the wooden hut up, and it was painted green, and it was always known as the hut. And in fact, the new fancy building we've got here today is still known as the hut because of the green hut that we had here for 15 or 16 years.
And of course, the building itself has, despite it only being a few decades old, has its own history in that Joey Dunlop actually opened it.
Yes, Joey was the first one across the threshold on the day it was opened, and there's a nice photograph in the entrance and a plaque to commemorate that particular day. Incidentally, just going back to the green hut, I can tell you that I bought the hut for £200, and when we decided to change it, it was all dismantled, the same way it was put together, and I sold it for £200.
You're listening to Agenda with Beach Buddies driving force Bill Dale.
This is a problem caused by the community, which needs a community response. I mean, we do get support from government, and we've had support from DEFA for 5 years now, since Richard Ronan was in, 6 years I think, since Richard Ronan was the minister, and that's helped us. But I do realise too that we need to be a little bit better independently funded. But I hope the government is going to carry on supporting us. If not, then we'll have to do something about that. But we're all in this together. You know, if like you as a proud Manxman and me as well, born and bred, and you look around the Isle of Man and you realise just how beautiful and how lucky we are to live in a place like this, you know, where we live in a safe environment, but more at the point, it is a beautiful place. And we take this far too much for granted. And when we just look around and see what can be achieved just by volunteers doing what we've done, and all of the wonderful people I've met along the way, it just sends a shiver down your spine sometimes. You know, it makes you realise this is a special, special place. And I've felt, because my mum and dad used to take me on the beach all the time when I was a kid, that, you know, you should have respect for the place. We had no rules when we went on the beach, except you take your rubbish home with you. You could jump in the sea, you could eat sand, if you want to do stupid things, you know, it's entirely up to you. But when it comes to anything that would harm the environment or wildlife, then absolute no-no. It was just a no-no, and I think we need to. That culture has changed in the Isle of Man, and I hope we brought back some of those ethics from all those years ago. But until we started, I mean, honestly, like I said, 30,000 pieces of plastic on one beach when it all started in 2006. So, you know, if Beach Buddies disappeared tomorrow, I'll tell you what, in 18 months you'd be back to square one, and you would have a massive problem again to start with. So this is something you've got to keep on top of. But thank goodness the education system has helped on this, because it's spread the word around the world. I've visited the States a couple of times now to talk in universities. I'm invited to go all over the place, but we've got branches around the world now. I mean, who would have ever thought a little Mickey Mouse charity with me and a few dogs starting it would ended up being like this? But
and that is a tremendous thing, isn't it? Because it isn't, as you say, it isn't just the Isle of Man. It's not even just the surrounding islands. You know, you're getting the message around all over the world. And of course, the Isle of Man is known not just for the thing that we're sort of prompted this interview, which is motorbike racing, but it also has other really interesting things, such as the first place to really properly tackle getting the plastic and rubbish off the beaches.
Yeah, and I thought when we achieved what we did in the first couple of years, I thought, well, you know, we're not the only ones. Everybody be doing this around the world. You know, it's not rocket science. You go to the beach and clean it up and keep it tidy, you know. And then I realised National Geographic came over. They'd had a whisper. I think they'd seen something on a Manx radio website and a BBC about this was a bit special. And when they came to the Isle of Man, they wrote in their feature on us that they said that we had found the solution to the problem simply by getting on with it. Very Manx, really. What we've done is don't listen to what anybody else says. Just get on with it and do it. Don't come up with an excuse not to do it. Like Manx people, we're good like that, aren't we? You know, where you get a bit stubborn and you just dig your heels in and say, I'm not going to accept that as being the answer. So we got on with it on that basis. So I think it's a very Manx thing, you know, what we've done. But then to be invited around the world to talk about what had happened in a little place like the Isle of Man is quite something, really. And I sometimes have to look back and sort of wake myself up a few times, you know, about the numbers of people who have read about us. Because I saw once we had a piece on BBC Northwest, and in every weekend in London they pick out what they think are the most interesting stories, and BBC Northwest has about 3-4 million viewers. BBC World News, they took up the story and put it out for one weekend, and I looked at the figures, 232 million viewers.
Wow.
Nuts, isn't it? You know,
Yeah,
and then
gosh.
and in the same, only a few weeks later was when National Geographic came. Their online audience was 30 million, and we were in that as well. So in the space of a couple of weeks, we had 300 million people had seen what we were doing. So that's helped without question show the rest of the world what can be done just simply by people getting together who care and doing something physically. Get off your backside and pick up some stuff. Get rid of the stigma of picking up other people's rubbish. And here we are. In it's a great reputation. I as a Manxman, I have to say, I think we should all, not just Beach Buddies, but everybody in the Isle of Man should be proud of what's happened here, because this is a great reflection on the Manx people.
And of course, what you're not doing is hanging around waiting for a decision from government, which may or may not happen in a short time frame. I mean, the chances of a year or two for government would be probably fairly slim. You may even still have been waiting for a decision.
Yeah, now I understand that things in government take a long time to happen. I mean, we are involved with DEFRA and a few other departments, and I have to say the support from politicians has been fantastic. They're absolutely on board with what we do. I think pretty much every politician who's in at the moment has been beach cleaning with us, and some of them many times.
And of course, I think as well, in the Isle of Man we forget that we are a relatively low taxed country, but we still expect very high standards of public service. So whereas it might have sounded as though I was having a bit of a dig at government, actually government can't be expected to do everything, can they?
No, and I appreciate that, because government is hands tied financially without question. I think that we're all guilty of thinking it's a bit of a bottomless pit, where you just go and ask them for some money and they give it to you. But also I have to say that it takes, unfortunately, money to make ends meet. I mean, this truck here, 29.5 grand. We've got 2 of them, right, and a trailer, and we rent a shipyard shed in Ramsey. Our costs going out are pretty huge. We've got 1 part-time member of staff, and 2 part-time members of staff. So we're
just 2 part-time members of staff doing all of this.
They don't work part-time. It's part-time pay. And I'm one of them. And we have one other as well, who's sadly very ill at the moment, and she set a great example to us. But the message really is that, I think we're guilty of not being a bit more professional in terms of fundraising. I am useless at asking for money. I always have been. Some people are very good at it. I can't do that. And I think we need to, at some point, take on somebody to raise funds for us. We're surviving on about, I would say, about £1,500 a week, which is it's a little amount of money. And during COVID, fundraising pretty much dried up. I'm grateful to a couple of companies, one in particular, Film Capital, who's been solid supporters and our main sponsor for about 6-7 years now. But the raising new money is not easy. It's easing off a little bit now that sort of COVID is in the background a bit. But fundraising, and now we've got inflation and caused by wars and whatever, it's making life, it's not so easy. But I'll tell you what, whatever happens, we're going to be here.
So if anyone's listening and has, I don't know, £50,000 burning a hole in their back pocket, how do they go about getting in touch and well, even if they've got £50 burning a hole in their back pocket, or even if they haven't got any money but want to help, how do they go about doing that?
We've got a nice little website, beachbuddies.net, which has got actually all of the postings on there, give you a history of what we've been doing. It talks about National Geographic and all of the experience and the expansion here, there and everywhere. So there's the full story is actually on the website, which is beachbuddies.net. And then we've got very lively social media pages, big following on Facebook. And I'm putting out press releases all the time as well. So I suppose my journalistic background has helped on that level, And I have to say, Manx Radio has been fantastic. The support that you guys have given and the interviews that you've given on a regular basis. And I hope, I'm not saying the same story every time, because, it's developing as it goes along. And And I think there's a book to come out of this at some point. I suppose as a journalist I'd better get started.
A film as well, maybe.
I don't. Who knows? Yeah, who's going to be the star man?
Yes, who would you have as your ideal leading man to play Bill Dale in Beach Buddies Beach Buddies the movie?
We were once called Beach Buddies, actually, by mistake. Yeah. In fact, we were called Beach Buddies, and somebody interpreted that the wrong way. Who would represent me? Probably some old guy. And maybe if you could go back a few years when I was young and handsome. That's never been, to be honest. I don't know. Who would it be?
Well, I'll leave you to have a think about that. One of the reasons that we're here today is because we're not far from beaches, but this isn't a beach that we're involved, or you're involved with helping to get clean. So where are we?
Well, we're at the headquarters of the Southern 100. And about 10 years ago, two of our great volunteers, Ron Ronan and Dave Wilkinson, came up with, who are very famous in the south, came up with the idea, why don't we clean up the course before the pre-TT Southern 100 meeting? So immediately I said, great idea, came down here, whole pile of volunteers turned up, and we sent them out with high-vis jackets because it's on the road, and bags and litter pickers, and they came back with a mountain of rubbish. Now, in the first couple of years, the first year in particular, we picked up massive amounts. Now, since then, it's just been keeping on top of it. So we do this for the pre-TT meeting and for the Southern 100 itself. And this afternoon we sent a bunch of volunteers out, and out they go, and we take the rubbish away, and you can see already that we've started some bags here, so we recycle as much as we can, like plastic and tin cans.
But even glass. Just round the relatively small area, which is the headquarters sort of enclosure, there's a lot of rubbish.
One of our ladies came early, and she filled a bag in about 15 minutes. So it just shows, and when you look around to begin with, you think there's nothing here.
And that's not to say that the Southern 100 Club are willfully going red littering. This is stuff that's ended up over the wall and blown in.
Yeah, and I do remember, and I can't remember the name of the rider, but there was a guy in the TT one time who lost the race because something had blown up off the road on the TT course and gone over the vent to stop the engine cooling, and he was leading the race. And when they got in, they found this piece of plastic was stuck on the front of the bike. So there is a genuine value in picking this stuff up, But the main reason to do this is to, it's an advert as well, isn't it? Because there's lots of people from across who are here, so it's good to do this to make the course look better. But more to the point, it reinforces the message about what we're doing, and I keep saying this, it's not just about beaches.
And going back to your point, really, isn't it? The hedges around the TT course are surrounded by water courses and drains and there's livestock around, and a lot of the plastic that's thrown out of car windows around the course can end up back into streams and then rivers, or indeed, as you say, in cows' stomachs.
Yes, and there's been incidents. I think a horse died with one of those balloons, one of those air balloons, one of these small things, and swallowed it and broke, and it choked up its system. I think it asphyxiated. I mean, that's the real outcome of these things, and I'm sure there's lots more cases where we don't even hear about. I have heard from farmers many times that they've lost animals because they've ingested plastics or something that shouldn't have been there, created by a human being. So, as it goes along, there's more and more things that you find out about this. And it's been a very interesting journey, to say the least, and the one thing to emphasise is it's not just going out and picking up rubbish, it's actually education system. I emphasised that before, but it's also about talking to families and trying to talk to commercial companies, that it's not acceptable to just throw your junk here, there and everywhere and let somebody else pick it up, because we're all in this together.
And ambition, have you got ambition? I mean, obviously the organisation is approaching 20 years, another 3 or 4 years' time. What would you hope that, the organisation will have achieved in 3 or 4 years' time when you get to your 20th anniversary? And the 20 years after that?
The entire message has been in the last few years is that, okay, we have somehow stumbled on the answer. We started with this problem the same as everybody else has around the world, in that there is masses of plastic on beaches and in the ocean. So we have stumbled through either chance or just the way that it's worked out. We've stumbled on the answer, and people have bought into it. They support us. They take part, and I think the real message is that ordinary people. You don't have to wait for governments to sort this out. This is something that human beings can sort out. We said it before, this is a community problem which needs a community response. Whether you have ever thrown any rubbish in the street or not, okay, on behalf of the ones who have, let's pick it up, because for every one of us, for every 9 of us, there's only one of them. And I think 90% of the people are actually 100% on board. It's just a handful of people who are messing it all up. And if we can just persuade people around the world that if they've got the same problems we had when we started, then it's not insurmountable. And we've shown, even a little place like this, that it can be done. And in particular, the response from islands that I've seen around the world has been fantastic. I signed up for a little group recently. I get invitations to join all sorts. And this one was called Island Innovation. And I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. So I did a bit of research and went on their website. It's got over 500 little islands in it, all the size of the Isle of Man or smaller, loads in the Pacific. So I joined in, and it looks like that they're starting to get the message. I'm getting messages from everywhere now, 500 different islands. Now, if they set an example to the rest of the world, you can forget big countries, because these sort of things. Oh, picking up rubbish, who cares? But when you talk about an island, it actually genuinely affects them, and we're all on the beaches all the time, or in the streets. So I've got great hope for that. So there's 500 islands. If they all followed the system we've used here, as simple as it is, with a few additions like sponsorship of bins, and if people go on the beach, you've got to have a bin to throw it in. Then we could actually see some real difference, and then maybe the big countries would say, you know what, if they can do it, maybe we should, and set an example. So my hope is that that sort of thing, and it is happening here, there, and everywhere, is that once, like it started with us, like 2 volunteers on a beach and 5 dogs, then maybe in the future people will realise, you know what, you don't need a big beginning, you don't need money, you just need the will to want to do it. So let's hope that happens all around the world.
And going back then to the question about the leading man in the film Beach Buddies, who do you reckon? Brad Pitt, Clint Eastwood?
I like Clint Eastwood, he's a good guy. But who's the other one? Oh, Pierce Brosnan is a good, handsome man. I look nothing like Pierce Brosnan, but he's a good guy, I like him.
What sort of litter was being collected at the Southern 100 Tidy Up?
Well, here we go. I mean, there's crispy bacon, what does it say? Frazzles. I don't even know what they are. I think that's quite old, actually. Turkish Delight, pieces of plastic, coffee cups, piece of cardboard here which says product of Spain. It looks like it's had vegetables or something in it, but where on earth that came from? How do you find something like that in the middle of nowhere? And then there's pieces of string. But as always, loads and loads of items of various pieces of plastic, and there's some just like household plastic here, like sort of, like a freezer bag. And then we've taken out, as we always do, the tin cans, bottles and plastic bottles, which we recycle. So this lot all goes to the energy from waste plant. When they're very kind to us, they don't charge us to leave it there, and it goes to make electricity. So, that's one of the things about the Isle of Man. One of the big advantages is no landfill, or very, very little landfill. And until the energy from waste plant came along, which was in your era when you were in the House of Keys, what a great decision that was, because it was controversial at the time because it wasn't cheap. But my word, what a difference it's made, because we don't have any landfill.
And of course, landfill sites around the world are some of the worst places to create litter, bizarrely, because it tends to blow out over fences and gets all over the place.
And as a leachate comes out, and if it's in the wrong place, at the end of the day, leachate's going to come out of something like that, wherever it is, even if it's in a huge hole in the ground, it's going to leak out. And that's nasty, really nasty stuff, I wonder sometimes about whether this sort of pollution is the thing that's been killing animals in rivers as well, fish in particular. When I was a boy, there were trout everywhere. And now you go and look in the river, they're pretty much dead, you know. It makes you wonder what is getting into the rivers to kill them. So, okay, that's one theory, but it could be anything. It could be weed killer from gardens. But it's funny how a beach buddies, it makes you start thinking about other things, you know, and thinking it through, and how do things like this happen? What is the solution? So, as you can see here, the solution is pick it up.
Yeah.
Don't chuck it in the road or anywhere in the first place.
Because things like microplastics, of course, that's the other issue. And these things, well, they come out of washing machines, they come out of all sorts of things, but they also are created by what are relatively large and easy to pick up bits of plastic, gradually getting broken down and becoming small bits of plastic.
Yeah, and that is the key to it, is that to look at a plastic bottle and you think, oh well, you know, that's quite a big thing, you know, no animal's going to swallow that unless you're a giant whale or something. But as I was saying before, it breaks down into small pieces, and those are the bits that become microplastics, and which is ingested in food now. It's right through the food chain. It seems to be everywhere. We had this incident just recently at the Marine Biological Station in Port Erin, where the polystyrene balls came out of the insulation fill in the walls, and it's now all over the place.
And there's nothing, well, I don't know, you tell me, is there anything that you can actually do about that?
It's a real problem. You could go along with one of these giant vacuum cleaner type things, but I mean, it happened a few months ago now, so it's probably a bit too late. I mean, really, it should never happen in the first place. There should have been some rules set in place to say, if you're going to demolish somewhere, for goodness sake, let's get the basics right and make sure that there's no pollution comes out of it. If you find anything that's dodgy, stop work there and then and do something about it. But it looks as if they've just demolished it and let it all go, you know. I'm sure they removed most of it, but there's massive amounts left, massive amounts.
And now, perfect timing, we've got a man arriving here with another bag of rubbish. What sort of things did you find on your journey?
A few plastic bottles, cans, general bits of plastic. So a bit of everything really, but not as bad this year as what it has been in a few other years. So yes, Bill Dale's message must be getting through a bit, I think. So it wasn't too bad along the bypass this year.
And this, of course, was your idea, wasn't it? You encouraged Bill to come down here.
Yes, in conversation, because I've been belonging to Beach Buddies for a number of years now, and myself and David Wilkinson, we thought, being Castletown lads, we thought it'd be a good idea to clean up the Southern 100 course for the pre-TT Classic and the Southern 100, because there was many a bottle and plastic bits and pieces around the place, so we thought it was a good idea. So we got Bill on board, and that was it. That was about 2012, I think it was, we started.
And what inspires you to actually do this? Because you know, many people would say, well, it's not my rubbish, so why would I bother going out to pick it up?
Well, it's the same with Beach Buddies. That's exactly the same, and I got involved in that many years ago, and it's just a case of keeping the place tidy and safe as well, because bottles, glass bottles, plastic bottles and cans could be a danger to the motorcyclists around, so we thought it was a good idea.
And what would your message be to people who may have been driving along the bypass and flinging an odd beer can, or just seen a beer can going into the recycled section, or a plastic bottle out of the car window?
Well, if they could take it home with them and put it in their own bin, it would be very helpful. It makes the place look untidy with these cans around the roadside, and a danger in many respects as well. So bring it home would be the advice.
That was Ron Ronan. What did volunteer Peter Stevens find on the course near Bellabeg?
What I found was, thank you Mr McDonald's for much of their wrappers, cups from Pret a Manger, beer tins, monster tins, all those sorts of things, and various bits of lorry and tractor. So.
And you've also found a full can of beer.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say anything about that, but I was hoping to get that away before anybody noticed.
But perhaps not in a drinkable condition by the look of it. It looks as though it's been in that can for more than a decade anyway.
It does, yeah. So there was a whole group of cans, 3 of them empty, and that one was still full. And I'm sure if you open that, Yeah, well, there you go. It's probably still all right, but I wouldn't touch it.
And I suppose the other obvious question is why do you do this? Why do you give up your time to go and collect other people's rubbish?
Well, I think it's the responsibility of everybody to make sure that the countryside stays as it should do, and not just for things like this. It makes it worse, obviously, when you're talking about racing and the potential hazard for bikes. But when you're going around the island and you see the same litter appearing everywhere, I think it is the responsibility of everybody to make sure, A, it doesn't happen. If it does, pick it up and put it in the bin. It doesn't take 2 minutes, or take it home with you.
And in terms of, we're talking about the racing's going to be on around about the time this programme is broadcast on Sunday. Are you a race fan at all?
No, I'm into it a little bit. I'm learning. We've only just moved to the island, and I'm learning about it, and I want to find out more about it, and this is one way of getting involved, to be honest.
We're standing right next to where Bill Dale has poured the tin of lager, and it does smell very good, actually. so perhaps we need to head to one of the local Castletown establishments and sample some fresh beer.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Are you buying?
Steady now. And finally, volunteer Ron Ronan gives us his top tips for Southern 100 and TT spectators. Well, obviously you've been round the course. And there's the train, marvellous. You've been round the course helping tidy it up. And this means more to you than just a general litter pick, because you're actually a bit of a race fan too.
Oh yes, I first watched the Southern 100 back in 1955 as a youngster, because I lived just down the road from the course, and the pre-TT Classic since it started. I've been watching that on a regular basis as well. So, and same with the TT. I was brought to the TT by my parents, so never had a motorbike myself, but always been interested in the bike racing.
And have you got any particular favourite spots that you like to watch?
Well, Castletown Corner is very handy. It's only a few hundred yards up from where I live now, so that's very handy on the grandstand there. It's quite a good spot. So that's where I generally end up, yes.
And have you been other places around the course?
Yes, I've been down to the Iron Gate and Bollabeg Corner and Crossfor Ways. So yes, I've been around a few, and Bollokegan Corner as well.
So having watched since 1955, you'll have many memories of many of the sort of the greats of road racing.
Oh yes, from those early days when there was Derek Ennett and Terry Shepherd winning. And that was my first memories, and Derek, of course, was a Castletown resident. And ever since then, there's the likes of Joey Dunlop, of course, and Ian Locker, and so on. It could go on and on with the names that have been here. Great TT riders.
And any particular memories of any particular race that sticks in the mind, or?
Well, I think it's the very first one, really, going with my father down to the Iron Gate. And watching it there, the very first race, because it was only a few hundred yards from where I lived, and to see this, it was amazing, really. And local ones riding, likes of George Costain and Sid Mizzen and Derek Ennett. It was quite an occasion, that first one.
And of course, the great thing about these classic races are that you get to relive that history, don't you?
Yes, the noises from the earlier days. So it's quite interesting. Yes, it brings back memories.
You'll be on the grandstand. Will you be there for the whole of the racing, or is it just particular days that you turn out just for the race days?
I generally see all the races, and occasionally at the practicing as well. It'll be the same for the pre-TT Classic now. I will see all of the races and maybe an odd practice session as well.
And for anyone listening who's looking for a really good spot around the TT course, any favourite spots?
Yes, on the TT course, well, Braddon Bridge, I usually go there once a year, and Union Mills, I go there, and also Quarterbridge. The 11th milestone is a good spot as well. You're stuck there on the inside the whole time, but you bring a picnic with you, and the fine weather, and it's excellent. So that's a really good spot. So all those places, I was there last year, and hopefully all of those four I'll be there again this year.
And on the subject of weather, it is going to be a lovely sunny fortnight, isn't it?
One would hope so. I've seen one or two wet ones as well, but one can only hope.
Tremendous work done by Beach Buddies, and some pretty good tips there from Ron Rowland. Let me know your thoughts on the programme by contacting Phil Gaughan at Manx Radio, and get in touch if you have any ideas for future shows. Don't forget, this programme is available as a podcast on Manx Radio's website. That's all for this week. I'm Phil Gaughan. Guramayo. Thanks for listening.